I know. We had time and string and everything. Yeah, you got it.
Helping by making it look like we have more. Oh, sorry, that was.
There's a sticker. There's a sticker. Higher risk rating than I do.
I'm waiting. We're good? Welcome, everybody. If you could please take your seats. We're ready to get started. Please come on in. Take your seats. My name is Lori Wolf. I'm the co-chair of Indivisible here in the 3rd Congressional District, and thank you. I am very honored to be able to be part of organizing this March for Your Lives Road to Change Town Hall. And first, I want to thank you all for taking time out of your Sunday, time out of your busy schedules to come here and support this really important issue. So thank you for being here. Yeah. Good. And this is Austin Berger. He helped me plan all this. He's with Students Demand Action, and he would also like to welcome you.
Good to see everyone here. So on March 24th, 2018, we saw the fires of change lit by a young and dedicated group of students from Parkland, Florida. Is the feedback? It is my privilege to introduce to you our panel for tonight, the student activists of the March for Our Lives movement.
All right, this thing's on. Hello, everyone. I just want to thank everyone, first and foremost, for being here. My name is Jamal Lemmy. I'm here on behalf of March for Our Lives. So I want you guys to give yourself a round of applause for just taking your time out of today just to, have this discussion. So my name is Jamal. I will be your co-moderator, and...
Hi, I'm Harani. I'm going to be your other moderator for tonight.
So I'm excited to be here. So let's introduce our panelists, and then after we'll just do a little something. So...
Hello, everyone. My name is Ariana Williams, and I am from the west side of Chicago.
Hi, y'all. I'm Kyra Simon, and I'm from Marjory Stoneman Douglass.
Hi, my name is Matt Deitch. I am one of the youth organizers with March for Our Lives.
Hi, everybody. My name is Bria Smith, and I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Hi, I'm Anjali Garadia, and I'm from Rochester, Minnesota.
My name is Shruti Srinivasa, and I'm from Maple Grove, Minnesota.
Hi, my name is Lauren Simon, and I'm from Maple Grove, Minnesota.
Hi, I'm Jorge Esparza Hernandez, and I'm from Mendota Heights.
I'm Tiger Mins. I'm from Black Lives Matter, St. Paul, and I'm from St. Paul.
All right, so before I go into how our programs run, I'd like to take a moment of silence for our brother Thurman Blevins, who lost his life to gun violence and police brutality. All right, thank you. hearing about stories like that is, I think that's why discussions and rooms like this need to exist, so we can come to, find results and find solutions in a friendly and civil manner. So, on a lighter note, welcome to the March for Our Lives in a town hall, including many of our friends that we've, became friends with, along this tour. And if you guys have never been a part of a March for Our Lives town hall, which I'm pretty sure you haven't, basically the way it's run is we have questions curated for students from Parkland, students from Chicago, and local students from Minnesota, including my friend from Milwaukee. And so basically we'll just go through the questions, and me and my co-moderator will ask them. And then after that, we'll open questions from the audience. All right, so let's get started. You good, Matt? All right, cool. For yeah, I feel great, man. For my students from Parkland, what are your goals for the summer on the Road to Change tour?
All right, our goal for this summer is really to get the youth and those who feel underrepresented in the polls engaged and willing to exercise their right to vote. I was researching yesterday, and it says that the majority of the American population are millennials, 22 to 37 years old, and in 2014, they made up 46 million of registered voters, and only 20% showed out. So it's really getting those people who feel that their voices don't matter. They look at the country and they're like, what can I do to change any of this? And they aren't encouraged to go out and vote and put their voice in, get educated, look at who represents them, get political, and sort of realize that your country reflects you, and put into their country what they want out of it.
When we first established March for Our Lives, the energy in DC was something that myself and many others had never experienced before. A sense of unity and togetherness where we were having important conversations that we knew would save lives. And we wanted to bring that energy around the country and have that important conversation with groups that experience different forms of gun violence and may not understand the urgency on this issue. And so by having town halls like this, we are going to perpetuate the conversation beyond what the opposition would like us to, so that we can come to a conclusion of policies that will actually save lives from both sides of the aisle, to not make this a left or a right thing, but to make it about saving people's lives by saving our kids. And so the goal of this tour is to register as many people as possible, to educate as many people as possible, and to get people motivated to vote. Because if we can get the young people to show up in this election, young people show up at about 1 in 5 rate, like you said. And if we get that to 2 out of 5, young people control every election till the day we die. So let's vote in some morally just leaders. Thank you.
All right, so for our students from Chicago, how is the funding and quality of the public school system in Chicago in correlation to gun violence?
Just this year, 147 people under the age of 21 have died due to gun violence. These were people who should have been teachers, principals, doctors, nurses, even artists, anything that they wanted to be. But instead, they were too worried about walking through the neighborhoods and hearing gunshots, or possibly getting shot at. These were people who should have been worried about AP homework or classwork in general. They should have been worried about if they would make their next class in the morning because they were too busy staying up all night. So in reality, if schools were not cut with their funding, students would be more interested in classes such as art classes or wood shop classes or any type of creative-based class, because that sparks interest in people going to college. Instead, people in Chicago who look like me, after we graduate high school, we look at each other like, what's next? We don't have enough money to go to college, and school didn't interest us because we only had the basic classes, or we barely had teachers because our teachers were cut every other year, so we were stuck with substitute until we got a new one. So why do we have to be the ones with what's left with the bottom of the barrel? We should have equal education, and we should be able to have classes that everybody else has.
All right, my question for the local students of Minnesota and Milwaukee. According to the Gun Violence Archive, there have been 18 mass shootings in Minnesota since 2013. How do mass shootings differ from other types of gun violence?
I think that a lot of the reason that we sort of feel that mass shootings has affected Minnesotan kids' lives is that it's something that we fear every day. We don't necessarily have the fear of individual gun violence all the time, but a lot of us do have that sort of thought in the back of your mind when you're attending school, this is something that could happen to us. So the more likely possibility of what would affect us locally would be mass shootings, and that's why I think a lot of us have focused on addressing that issue in particular.
I go to school in Maple Grove, which is relatively an affluent area of Minnesota, and we've had like 1 or 2 gun threats happen since Parkland, which is crazy because you don't think that it would affect an area like Maple Grove, which I think it shows how the problem of gun violence can affect everyone, some more than others, but because it can happen so close to home, and because that form is often in mass shootings in schools, it's an issue that's close to our heart, and it's one that we want to focus on.
I definitely have to agree with these two. I feel like mass shootings do affect us a lot closer to home, because in the time that I've been to Osseo and since Parkland, we've had a few gun threats, but we've had a few other threats too. I don't see much gun violence close to my house in Osseo in Maple Grove, but I feel like we have more mass shootings, and that affects us a lot more than gun violence, because we don't see gun violence as often as we do mass shootings. If that makes sense.
Okay.
I think it's important that we make the distinction between mass shootings and gun violence. I also think it's important that we recognize the underlying issue, and that is guns. We have these mass murders. We have these mass murders that occur in our country because we have these guns. But we also have day-to-day gun violence that happens. I live in Mendota Heights. We don't see that all the time. I can't remember the last time we saw that in Mendota Heights, but I live really close to St. Paul and half an hour away from Minneapolis, where that is an everyday thing. And I think it's important that we do make that distinction, but we also realize that this isn't about making that distinction. This isn't about politicizing these things. It's about realizing that there is a tool out there that is used for these mass murders and for these day-to-day occurrences that we need to get rid of.
Being from St. Paul, I done seen it all. And when I was in high school, at Harding Senior High School, when I was a junior, they took a loaded Ruger out of a student's backpack. Gun violence, mass shootings, back then it wasn't as relevant as it is now, but I could only imagine being in school now. And I believe that with this discussion, focusing how it affects Minnesotans, since 2013, there's been that many mass shootings. It's like in the past, this stuff has been slid under a rug. I don't know if all of y'all know, but YouTube was created at Central High School here in Minnesota, over in St. Paul. They sold it to the people out in California for $315 million. it wasn't until we were able to take these cell phones out and really record this and really have a discussion like this where it all kind of narrated with good questions to say, it actually has been affecting us a lot more. And now that it has this discussion, this light, this is exactly what we needed, period. From our black community to every single student out there that is in fear of a gun taking their life. That shouldn't be how we prosper in America. That's not what it's about. And so when you mix in Black Lives Matter and then you look at law enforcement, and these are the tools that take away us as fathers, as black men, away from our families typically, this is a huge, huge problem. Gun violence is affecting us here in Minnesota. That's why we're here having the discussion now.
Awesome. I agree 100% with you. So can you raise your hand if you or someone you know has been affected by gun violence? Okay. So I do live in Milwaukee, the northern side of Milwaukee, the high-risk side of Milwaukee, the part of Milwaukee where you don't want to raise a black family, you don't want to raise a black male. Because in this neighborhood, the relationship with our police department is so strained. We're walking on eggshells around them because the abuse of this gun reform is not, it's just terrible. So going off of what you're saying before, I see gun violence every day. And when I was younger, I'd be playing with my friends, and the next day, one of my friends are gone. And so I'm like, hey, do you know where he went? He was shot. Well, we don't know who he's shot by because it's so conditioned within my neighborhood, my community, that gun violence is normal, that gun violence is our reality. And as I sit here at this chair, gun violence cannot be my reality. It can't be anyone's reality. And in Milwaukee, the black community has been fighting for gun reform, for this issue of gun violence for many years. And due to the March for Our Lives movement, we were able to get that momentum. We were able to get the platform of advocacy that we so surely deserved. So a statistic, between the ages of 18 and 22, the highest rates of gun violence are targeted towards black males in Milwaukee, and that shows that we are being targeted towards the inner city communities who can't defend themselves, the inner city communities who don't have a voice, who don't have a platform to speak about the injustices that they're suffering from. And I think that's totally unfair. And I go to a school that's 20 minutes away from my residence, and it's in a white suburban. So I understand both sides of the spectrum. Being that stereotypical school, that the white school that everyone might think that someone's going to come in and shoot up the school as a joke, and then also having to go home and hear gunshots, it's like, where do you go? Where do you find safety? Where do you find safe haven? Because gun violence is prevalent in your life where you go home and you go to school. So I just sitting here and coming from a city and going on this tour to talk about the people back in my hometown, how we really, really need gun reform. We really need background checks. We need legislation to be passed because there are many lives been taken away, just like last night in Minnesota. It's an issue, but everyone's turning a blind eye. And it's awesome that the youth sitting at this panel can have the guts to sit here and ask for demand. That shows something, that we care about our lives.
All right, so for our students from Parkland, what are some misconceptions about this movement that you would like to clarify?
We're not trying to take anyone's guns. We don't touch the Second Amendment. Every single one of our policies is constitutional. We are promoting exactly what the NRA claims they're promoting, which is responsible gun ownership. If you own a gun, you should not want an infant or toddler to be able to reach it and shoot someone. That happens once a week in this country for the last 3 years. Once a week, a toddler or baby will grab a gun and shoot themselves or someone else fatally because we don't have safe storage laws in this country. Another misconception is that we're some kind of front for some kind of political movement. We were founded on my friend's living room floor in tragedy, and we came together to create change so no one should have to feel that way ever again. And we're going to call out people on both sides so we can keep people in power accountable for what is happening to this country, because we need morally just leaders. We're not just promoting the left or the right. We're promoting people who actually care about people and have policies that help people and aren't going to stand in the way of change because it fits their wallet.
All right, we also realize that mass shootings aren't the only sort of gun violence. We have people from Chicago, Milwaukee, local people to show that drive-bys, shootings that happen every single day are just as worthy of media attention, just as worthy of being on everyone's minds. The things that people... Okay. Because it takes usually 49 people, it takes a massacre to really get on people's minds. It's crazy that we've become so desensitized to everyday gun violence. And the fact that people every day are in pain, they're suffering, and people just aren't giving them the attention they deserve. We're trying to uplift all the voices of the people in those communities who feel that their voices don't matter because they don't see themselves in the media. They don't see the news giving a tribute to their friend that was shot on the block the next day. And they also feel that the media usually only focuses on certain communities. Inner city kids are looking for a voice. And with this movement, we're looking to uplift everyone, every voice around the country, and letting them know that their voice matters and that they'll be able to vote.
All right, my question is for you.
Bless you.
Yeah, bless you. Matt, let's stay focused. People think that all gun violence in Chicago is due to gangs, yet they have never even visited your neighborhood. What have you found to be true in your community?
I think the most that I can speak of is from experience. And I know that I have a lot of death in my family due to gang violence, but it hasn't been all. And I have friends who have been shot and killed, and they were never in a gang. They were scholars, some who were even supposed to be valedictorians, who were shot and killed, and that's sad. My father I lost at the age of 8, my uncle at the age of 9, both due to gang violence. They were heavily involved. But that was because they were already, before they were born, they were already fitting into that path of being a gang member, a drug dealer, and everything else that comes along with it because of the way that we live in Chicago. We're under-resourced and we need help, and we're crying for help. I lost another uncle, but basically due to the fact that he won a dice game. I saw him the day that he died, and he was too busy at my mom's house asking me to go run in and out of the house to grab him some banana pudding. That night he died because he won a dice game. People are being too easily accessed to having guns. It's no way that somebody should be able to drive out of the state or drive out of the city and come back with a gun when we can't drive out of the state and come back with fireworks because it's illegal in Chicago. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're all here on the stage, because we all can relate and we all share our pain, and that's the way that we band together, is because we don't want anybody else in this audience or whoever's watching to feel the same pain that we do.
All right, so for my local students, what are your personal experiences with gun violence?
Luckily, I don't have a lot of personal experience with gun violence, but there have been a few instances where we do experience it in local communities, and as Minnesota as a whole is a pretty safe state, we tend to forget about. I know, for example, when I was in 5th grade, so I was 10 years old, a gunman was walking around the neighborhood of my elementary school, and they weren't really clear on what was going on, and we were scared. So we hid behind a drywall plaster wall since our room was pretty much all windows, and we stayed there for a couple of hours just kind of hanging out, wondering what was going on, knowing that someone was out there trying to hurt us. And I remember thinking to myself that day at 10 years old, I'm going to die in this classroom. And I know that it's something that a lot of us don't experience, and hopefully most of us will never experience, but we have to remember that it does happen infrequently, but enough in Minnesota that it affects our local communities as well.
Last month, there was a young boy, I think around 7 or 8, that was shot 2 or 3 minutes away from my house. I heard the sirens go through my neighborhood, and I remember reading that and thinking, I never thought that there would be a shooting so close to my home. And again, I've never directly been affected by gun violence, but I remember hearing that news and just thinking it was just crazy to me how much closer gun violence has come to me, and I think that just shows how much more we need change, because it's beginning to affect not just 1 or 2 people, but whole communities, and that's why we need to get out and vote and make change.
I personally, thankfully, do not have any experiences with guns, but a few months ago, I thankfully was out of school at this time, but there was an active shooter in Osseo a few minutes away from the middle school, and they shot a police officer. I don't know if anybody has heard of it, but he was in the hospital for a while, and it was a little after the walkout too, and at that point, I was extremely fearful, not for my life, but for my siblings' life, because my sister was at the high school a little bit before it happened, and I don't know what would have happened if the active shooter was in the school. So I thankfully personally do not have an experience with a shooter.
I think we can all talk about the stories that we hear on the news that surround us. I mean, around Mendota Heights and Inver Grove Heights in a movie theater parking lot, a kid around my age was shot. We hear about these things in St. Paul daily, but I think everyone in this room needs to realize the people up here, yes, we have been lucky enough to not have personally been affected by this, but it's unfortunate that we are the ones up here talking to you guys about this, and not the people who have gone through this that deserve to have that voice. Someone earlier, I think it was from Parkland, stated that one of the goals of this whole movement is to make sure that more people have a voice, and we need to make that happen. It is unfortunate that we don't see more people speaking out from the inner city, from places where this is a common issue, and I think that that's something that we definitely need to work on as we move forward.
And I would like to definitely second kind of what he says, because I've been working closely with a woman who has a PhD in psychology and also trauma therapy, things of that nature. And one of the things she stated is that when you're witnessing these things on social media, YouTube, these other platforms, it's actually resonating in the back of your memory, whereas these things can spark something in your mind to make it feel like you were there. Like you'll feel that hurt through that same person. You might even feel your heart start beating fast when you're on Facebook and you scroll down your timeline like yesterday, last night, and see another shooting. You're feeling that too. That's why you're all here. We're all feeling it. And what's unique about this entire situation is March for Our Lives came to the forefront, and 2 to 3 weeks ago when we hosted an event with the first African-American mayor of St. Paul, Austin had came up. And the work that's coming out of this, I was able to have an opportunity to introduce Austin to one of the people in my city, St. Paul, who was downtown St. Paul, had just got shot in his leg. So as we're doing the event with the mayor, we're able to introduce the mayor to this young man who was a father of two. Was not on the news, wasn't reported, and the shooter got away. These are incidents that affect us, and this is an opportunity also I would like to chime in more of what happened last night, to understand that we're seeking the truth. We're also here to investigate. And when we have officers that have falsified reports in the past, Brady Gigolo, they deem officers such as that, it's hard for us to just say, oh, he had a gun, he got shot 6 times in his back. Be quiet. There's also such thing as the due process. And if he's running away and he does have a gun, there also is a statute in place and a law in place that would say, okay, if you have a firearm, that's 10 years in jail or a year in jail. It's not execution on sight. It's the due process that I think us in America were great, and it's going to continue to take this unity. This unity is very important and unique for us all to be here, and I think let's take advantage of this time to shine light and give these young ones the power they need to prosper. They weren't all able to make it to the protest last night or even today. That's okay. We understand that, and this is where we unite and we can relay messages of what happened at the 4th Precinct if you want to find out more. But we see your guys' energy too. Keep it up, and let's move forward as a community. I think we are on the great and better things of bringing that change and showing and highlighting what's going on in Chicago and really talking about it and having the conversation. Let's keep bringing it back to this.
Like I said before, I do live in the inner city of Milwaukee, and I don't remember which panelist said that we need to give the inner city residents the voice to speak about the inequities that they're suffering within their communities, because I have so many stories, but I don't have so much time to tell you guys. And I know he said pick one story, but I just want to say police brutality is gun violence. It is. And people forget that. They think that because you're given this authority, this label, this entitlement, that you can abuse your power and get away with it. And there's so many instances when I know someone and a part of their family, they're getting shot by the police, but they don't get the justice that they deserve. Or when in Milwaukee, there's like this ring of just illegal firearms just being cycled in, cycled out, cycled in, cycled out. And they're all illegal, there's no licenses, they have no claims to anyone. So when you are planted with this gun, not only do you get a fine for having that gun, but a fine for even being black with the gun. So I guess one story that I would want to share is not a story within my city, but a story within mental health. That I had a friend who, he had an illegal gun, and he used it to shoot himself, because he was being sentenced to a crime that he didn't commit. But he saw how society would prove him to be wrong for that crime, so he took the easy way out because he had that accessibility to that gun, and he used it. And he was only 18. So I guess right now I want to say, I know there's lots of adults in here, but to the youth, your voice is the most powerful thing that you can ever use right now. It's so powerful. And I know we're at a time where we think we're being told that you don't know this, you don't know anything about that, or this or that. Yes, you do, because you feel it. I feel it, and you feel it too. So you should know that when you use your voice to say what you want, to get what you deserve, say it loud. Because we're all sitting here, like you said before, I don't remember your name, I'm so sorry. But you said before that we're given this opportunity to speak about all these different things because we've been affected by them personally, and we want to see reformative change, and we want to push legislation, and we want to attain the success and the freedom that we deserve. That's bravery. That's courage, because we're youth. We should be thinking about other things other than gun reform or gun violence. I shouldn't have to walk outside of my house and be like, oh, I should not take this street because lots of police officers patrol on it, or another brother got killed down that street. That's crazy. And I just want to, I guess, everyone here has a plate, and it's time for us to eat.
I'm gonna say something. What's up?
I just wanted to say something real quick. So domestic abuse is one of the #1 indicators that someone will commit another violent crime, and it is one of the #1 indicators used in background checks. So I just want to do a quick poll. Who here thinks domestic abusers should not have access to firearms? That means disarming a lot of police officers.
Wow. He should have just dropped the mic while he was at it, just walked out. I'm sorry I didn't acknowledge this at the beginning, but this young person at the front has a sign that says the young people will win, and I just want to let everyone know that the young people will win. Turn it around, turn it around. All right, also, I've seen this question too many times, and you guys are gonna laugh when you hear this one. For the Parkland students, how do you respond to the argument that the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is with a good guy with a gun?
The FBI did a report, and they studied over 100 shootings, and only one of them was stopped by a good guy with a gun. Less than 0.75% of them were stopped with a good guy with a gun. There are a lot of protests and marches around the country, and one of my favorite signs that I saw at one of these marches was this kid had a sign, probably like a 16-year-old, and the sign said, "When you say it takes a good guy with a gun to stop a bad guy with a gun, it sounds like you're just trying to sell me 2 guns." So when you hear that, it takes a good guy with a gun to stop a bad guy with a gun, you have to know who said that. It was Wayne LaPierre, who got paid $5 million from the NRA. The NRA gets huge kickbacks from gun manufacturers. Some of them get a 10% commission from certain gun manufacturers. So their job is not to represent the Second Amendment or to stand on the flag or to represent its members. Their job is to sell guns because that's what benefits them personally. So that narrative has been debunked tons of times, that the only way to truly stop someone violent from committing an act of gun violence is to have them be disarmed in the first place, to have them not have access to weapons if they are proven violent individuals. So that's why we need something like universal background checks for all firearm sales, because I don't tell this story too often because I don't like bringing this guy up, but my Senator Marco Rubio, don't boo, vote. No, we had a meeting with him, and I was trying to get why he doesn't support universal background checks on the record, and I asked him, and he said, well, if I buy a gun, and you know I'm a decent person, and I sell it to, or I want to give it as a gift to my nephew, does he need a background check before I give it to him as a gift? Yes! Yes! I don't know your nephew. Like, That's almost exactly what happened with the Waffle House mass shooting, where the father gave his son his weapons back after he was already told that he shouldn't have those guns in the first place. And so that entire argument is invalid. We need, if that man wasn't able to get guns because he wasn't legally allowed to get them according to the system, then he wouldn't have been able to commit that mass shooting, which was also, lives were saved by a good guy without a gun, James Shaw Jr. So in conclusion, good guy with the gun stopping bad guy with the gun is a stupid argument. Okay, thank you.
To build off what Matt said, we don't live in a storybook where there's good guys, bad guys, villains, and heroes. There's no definitive good guy, bad guy. And you could draw back to what happened at my school, where our armed officer on campus, the good guy with a gun, sat and hid behind a wall, played hide and seek during the shooting. He wasn't there to protect the students. He wasn't there to save us, and he was the good guy with the gun. So that argument's completely illogical. It doesn't always work out, and there's good guys without guns, like James Saw Jr., that are able to go save people, save the day, and we can't see the solution as arming more people and adding more arms into it. Even with adding arms on campus, that wouldn't work out, arming teachers and whatnot.
The NYPD released a study that showed that they only hit their target 1 in 5 times in a firefight. I have teachers that would definitely not make it in the NYPD. And so when you're handed a solution that is an NRA sales pitch, don't take it as a solution, take it as bullshit, because that's what it is.
All right, for our young lady from Chicago, the state of Illinois has strict gun laws, yet Chicago is still a hub for gun violence. Why?
So how many people in this room will be celebrating the 4th of July by either watching fireworks or popping them themselves? See, it's a difference. My family would not. Like I said earlier, fireworks are illegal in Illinois. So if someone like myself was to go into Indiana and buy fireworks, I would get a year because it's a federal offense in prison. I would go to prison, right? So tell me why the Chicago police only solve 30% of the homicides in Chicago, but they're more worried about fireworks being brought into Chicago. I don't understand the reasoning. You're more worried about people celebrating a holiday than people getting shot every day. It doesn't make sense. So according to the Chicago Tribune, only 40% of the guns recovered in Chicago were bought in Illinois. So that means 60% of the rest of the guns were from surrounding states who do not have enough or strong gun laws to even prevent that from happening. And a fifth of those were from Indiana. So I can't go get fireworks, but I can sure go get a gun and shoot anybody because they do not solve the murders there.
Local students, what have been the biggest obstacles to create change in your community?
Okay, I guess so. The biggest obstacle to create change in my community is, this might sound crazy, but speaking to adults. Yeah, let that sink in. People might think that this is a youth movement, but gun violence affects everyone. So in my community, everyone's so conditioned to like the violence, the crime, and all the negative things that might overcome us from reforming our community. And just trying to talk to adults and say like, hey, my life, I'm nervous for it. Like I'm fearing walking down the street, and I don't want all these guns to be passed, and I don't want all this stuff happening. And they're like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what you're saying. I guess that's one of the hardest things, because when you're being told by the person or the people or the generation that you look up to so fondly that you don't know what you're talking about, that your movement doesn't really make any sense, it kind of feels like you have to jump over that and move past them and forget about them. When we're doing work right now in the present because we're working to fix our future.
I just want to add on to that really great idea, in that I know personally from my experience in Rochester, being also a wealthier sort of area in most respects, a lot of times people just refuse to see that it's an issue at all. They refuse to accept the fact that gun violence might be an issue in Rochester, Minnesota, because it's not something that gets talked about enough. So when we, again, try to speak to adults about issues that we think affect us, the representation in representatives, first of all, they don't look like us. And second of all, they don't want to acknowledge the fact that these issues might affect us in a way that will force them to do anything to change what they're already doing. If you talk to someone, if you talk to representatives, like when we go to talk to our superintendent, he first of all will refuse to accept that this might be an issue. He'll just say, oh, you're safe, don't worry about it. And then if you push, he'll just say, we don't have the money. And that shouldn't be the obstacle that we as youth have to overcome for the fact that we're afraid for our lives. So it's up to adults to acknowledge the issues and then to be willing to work with the youth to try to overcome the issues that all of us face together.
I live in a red district. Eric Paulson is my representative, and he is. So if you live in the 3rd district, make sure you vote Dean Phillips in November. Get Eric Paulson. So for those of you who might not know, Eric Paulson has taken $20,000 from the NRA. Where I live is a very gun-friendly area. When I started organizing the walkout at my school, the first response was, oh, we're going to do an anti-walkout for guns. And our walkout wasn't for taking away guns. And I think people at my school and youth that lean more right don't understand that, and people aren't willing to listen to the fact that we're not trying to take away our guns, we're trying to make our communities safer. And I think that's one of the biggest obstacles living in a red area is that they're not always willing to listen, and we need to find a way to make a middle ground so that people do listen to what we're trying to say, and we can listen to what their concerns are, and we can come to a solution that makes everyone happy and everyone safer.
She basically pretty much got Maple Grove in a nutshell, so. I think the biggest obstacle locally was that we are a red area, and most people want to protect their Second Amendment, which is understandable. We're not trying to take away your guns. We're trying to make your guns less accessible to people who don't need guns. You know what I'm saying? I think the biggest obstacle I faced, especially with doing the walkout, was the fact that people tried to find an excuse on why they should keep their guns and why the walkout was stupid and pointless, which was pretty much messed up. And the fact that they want to protect their guns more than their kids is pretty messed up, considering we're your future. And I mean, I don't really have anything with guns. I don't like them personally, but my big obstacle was my parents because they completely opposed to everything that I was doing since they're so pro-gun, and I am not. And I feel like one obstacle we need to overcome is the stigma that most mass shootings are caused by mental illness. And we definitely know that's not true because, holy crap. Sorry. I think that's just one of the biggest things we need to overcome. And we need to overcome the fact that I get that this is an amendment that's been with us for years and years and years, but we need to stop being so protective over something that can harm, and we need to be more protective over something that is our future and something that is more important to us than something that could kill us, if I'm making sense.
Jason Lewis. Where is she? There she is. Jason Lewis and Regina Barr were the only two people that we invited to our town hall in District 2 that did not show up. Now, we have tried multiple times to get in contact with Jason Lewis. We had a lot of people try to get into his town halls that he hosted, but they were behind closed doors. And if you watch footage of those town halls, there are empty seats in there. That's not okay. Now, we also went straight to Regina Barr's office and tried to get her to speak with us. It was a group of about 4 or 5 of us, and we were just regular high schoolers to her assistant. And when we went up and said we wanted to meet with her, she said that Regina Barr was out eating lunch. Now, we decided to wait, and it wasn't until the assistant came over and asked us what group we were with, and we told her that we were with MN Never Again. She went back to her office for a little bit, about 2-3 minutes, came back and told us that Regina Barr could not join us, that her lunch was running late, and that she had a meeting to go to. Now, if she was willing to meet with us before she knew that we were with that organization, that seems a little fishy. And right now, that is our biggest issue and our biggest obstacle in District 2. As far as I'm aware and as far as my experience goes, all of the adults have been extremely helpful and grateful that we are voicing our opinions out in public. If I see orange sweatshirts everywhere, and I love that. Yeah, there's an orange shirt right there. But if we can't even talk to our representatives who are supposed to be representing all of us, not just a specific group that they can cherry pick whenever they want through applications online for their town halls, then that's not okay, and we can't get change done if that's the way that the local government is going to run.
All right. So for the older generation that's all in this room here, now this is something y'all are witnessing. These 3 young ones right here from Minnesota are talking about replacing. So when November comes, it's really going to be real. They're not just talking about this stuff. They're pulling strings out of a hat to say, no, mass shooting is a problem now. We need to fix it now. It was the saddest thing to see as an adult who already graduated college, and moved on with my life, to see these young ones be shot down at the Capitol in the aspect of their bills not getting passed here in Minnesota. So when you talk about obstacles, you're looking at something that this should be a bipartisan issue. A lot of you younger ones will pick up on this lingo, the language that they speak down at the Capitol that stops these bills from crossing the front line and saying, yes, that makes sense. That's common sense. Let's take and fix that. We need people in office that are willing to have the discussion. Let's start there. And that's all they're asking for. It's not a lot. It's not to take the guns. If they say that one more time, it'll make me angry. But they have to say it over and over and over and over and over, because they get badgered with that same question over and over again. That's the obstacle. So what we need is all adults in this room, and likewise, and for you all to share that message, bring that barrier down and talk to your kids. Have the conversation one-on-one in a more private setting, as we need to do as adults for our young ones. This is a pressing issue for them. They've already now started putting bills in place and changing laws in other states. So they're actually really bringing a lot of change. So when November comes, it's that time to get more people to participate. And one of the biggest things I said in the back room was that us in our African-American society, we hardly ever vote. The turnout rates for us, we all know the history. Not only that, we've had Martin Luther King fighting for it, but he fell victim to gun violence, in a sense. And that was really our leader, our hope. So for all the miscommunication, our Black Lives Matter St. Paul movement is tailored right back off of how MLK did it, to show the love to each other. He didn't say black civil rights. He said civil rights. He left a gray area. So when people see this black, 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 know that what's behind that black is this real thought out process of building love, unity, giving them their voice, giving us our voice. This is actually doing something, whether you want to acknowledge it or not. And I believe that with representatives being here, that shows a lot. They're not up here. It shows a lot for them to be out here. And I think let's give them a round of applause again for the ones that have enough nerve to stand up and do that. I think that means a lot. And I want to thank you for that. And we'll help get over that obstacle.
All right, so for our Parkland students, what strategies have you found to be effective when talking to someone who may not agree with you on this issue?
I've spoken to thousands of NRA members around the country, and when the conversation starts, it's usually aggressive. It's usually very politicized. And then we go into what we're actually fighting for. And I would say 99.9% they agree with almost everything we say. Every single policy point they stand for, yet they still believe that the NRA-backed politicians stand up for them. In an interview with Fox News, one of the Illinois NRA leaders was asked about two of our policy points, universal background checks and safe storage laws, and red flag laws, my apologies. And they said on the live television that those policies would save lives. And yet they're funneling millions of dollars to block those policies because it hurts sales. And when you explain that to someone, when you can show them A, B, C, and it all adds up because it's really simple what is going on in this country in regards to this issue, we all come together on this. 97% of people want universal background checks. We don't agree on anything that much. Literally anything that much. The number one reason given to why we don't need universal background checks is that they already exist. Think about that. That's why what we preach is, it boils down to REV, register, educate, vote. So, can we all say that with me? I'm gonna say like 1, 2, 3, and we go register, educate, vote. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Register, educate, vote. Okay, so what that means is you register to vote, then you actually educate yourself on this issue and these policies, and then you actually vote for leaders that represent you regardless of party, because we say this all the time. This is a nonpartisan issue that needs bipartisan solutions and support. It's incredibly easy for people to hate on us online and through like different chat rooms and different forums because they don't actually see the humanity of this. And that is why we're traveling around the country and connecting with these communities and meeting with young leaders like the ones on this stage and the ones that we met with earlier today, and to actually connect and build a coalition, a unified front on this issue that is more organized than the NRA's money. And the reason that we need that is because these policies will work and save lives. All we need to know is that we are more powerful, our vote is more powerful than the powers that be.
For me, it's about being human. I feel like usually we are so quick to judge, we're so quick to attack someone that disagrees with us rather than sit and listen to what they're saying. People in discussions, arguments, they listen to respond rather than listen to hear. If someone disagrees with you, listen to what they're saying, and then form a response, and then have a discussion rather than an argument. Don't approach them with hate. Approach them with compassion, an open mind, an open heart. Like, if you like Star Wars, and I like Star Trek, because Star Trek's better, we could have that disagreement.
That's a very strong opinion.
Good example.
we could have that disagreement. We could still have a civil discussion and still be cordial to one another rather than screaming, fighting, throwing insults, and saying that because we have that difference in opinion, we're different people. We're all humans. We all breathe, cry, we have pain, we suffer. We should be able to come together and be able to see it as a united front. We're stronger.
Raise your hand if you have that family member that you are afraid to talk about politics at Thanksgiving with. Keep your hand up if you learned something tonight. Use what you learn and talk to them. I say this everywhere we go, that if the conversation stays in this room and you fail to continue this conversation with what you learned today, then you have failed us and we have failed you. The only way we win is by continuing this conversation. So that is up to you guys now. And now I'm going to have a shameless plug. Can everyone please take out your cell phones? And text the word change to 97779. 3 sevens. I'm going to say that again. Change, spelled exactly like loose change. And then it's 97779. And if you do that, you'll stay connected with Road to Change and the different things that we're pushing out, new policy pieces, because what we're doing is educating ourselves around this country and talking about policies that we know will work because we've seen them work in different states and different areas. And that's why if arming teachers worked, you'd hear me talking about it. But it doesn't, and so I'm going to talk to you about other policies, and those are the policies that we're going to talk to you about if you stay on in the loop with Road to Change and with March for Our Lives. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Matt. And all right, I'm going to make fun of myself before, I mess this up, because yesterday we were in Milwaukee, and a similar question like this was asked. And I saw WI for the state, and me being myself, I go, oh, I'm here, blah, 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 in District 5, Wyoming. I guess in my brain, like, whatever goes on in there, I was just like, it's one of those WI states, and I just went along, and, like, my friend next to me, he's whispering, Wisconsin. I'm just like, I heard it, but I was just like, nah, I'm good, I'm all right. But let me ask this question to our local friends, and no, I had it. Minnesota. I won't. I just, I'm not, there's a lot of big numbers on here. I'm dyslexic, so. All right, as of the 2015 census, there were approximately 116,000 young people from the ages of 18 through 29. The voter turnout among registered voters in 2014 was 236,000 in Minnesota, District 5. See, I got it. The voter differential was 110,502. So young people can undoubtedly determine the outcome of this district if they turn out to vote. How are you planning on inspiring the youth in your community to vote for morally just leaders?
Yeah, because you're in District.
Come on, don't be shy.
I'm not in District 5, but
Okay, so let's extend the question,
Okay.
Because I'm pretty sure you guys all have something very educated to say.
Well, I'm with a group called West Metro Walkouts, and we organize different events throughout the district in order to get young people out. Because it's young people like us that are running the organization, I think it's easier for us to connect with other young people. I think that's one of the reasons why Parkland has been such an effective change, is because you guys have inspired a group of young people to get out because we can relate to you. And so on July 8th, I think, we're having an ice cream social at Lake Calhoun at Ben & Jerry's at 4 o'clock to run voter registration for that community. And so I just think it's about making sure that people like us are running voter registration and organizing events that we can get people like us that relate to us to come out and help us make change.
That is a perfect answer, and I'd just like to add on, also not being in District 5, we have been working towards registering voters. I'm from specifically Rochester, and the March for Our Lives in Rochester, I sort of set that up there. So we have that going. We don't have a ton of organizations, we have a few, and we've been registering voters, especially the youth, at rallies and things like that. And we've been registering students at schools, so just shout out, if you're at a school and your school doesn't run voter registration, do that. Set that up. Be that person that starts that thing. And then the next part of that battle is getting the youth that we low-key forced to register to vote to show up and vote. So if you are a youth in this room, if you're a parent, if you know someone who is at that age, drag them to the polls. Take them with you. I mean, if you haven't seen your friends in a while and you want to hang out, and then that group can go and vote. You have the opportunity as youth and as people who know youth to make that difference and close that gap so that we are able to change and put in place what we want to do.
First off, oh my God, please vote. Thank you. See, I'm not really part of a group, but I've got social media. And thank God, because definitely what I try to do to inspire others to vote is I spread through social media like Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, and I help educate them on why they should vote and why it's good to vote, because a majority of young people don't vote. And that hurts, because a lot of those kids that could vote could really help us out. I'm really thankful for social media because I want to join a group, but I'm not in a group. But I did go around the school, and I'm planning on doing it this year for my senior year. I'm going to go around the school, and I'm going to pretty much force people to sign up for voter registration. So expect it if you go to Osseo. But I'm pretty much going through social media, and I'm spreading around like sheets that you can like, where you can order sheets or something. I don't know what it's called, but you can get the voter registration sheets, and then you can spread around all sorts of different things on social media. So thank you. Thank you for whoever created it. Anyways.
All right, I'm going to test you guys real quick. REV, what does it stand for? That's exactly what we need to be doing. And I think everyone here is starting with that R. We need to register people to vote, whether it's with a group, which M&Ever, again, is working to get some events out to make sure that we can get people registered to vote, but even individually. Devin, I don't know if she's in this room, but there she is. She was kind enough to hand me a few voter registration forms for my grad party yesterday. And the first thing I asked people before I said thank you for coming or anything is, are you registered to vote? And if they said no, didn't give them food until they did. But the thing is, when we talk about youth voting and when we talk specifically about high schoolers, that's really only the senior class that we're talking about, because they're the ones that turn 18. So we have to look at that education, and we have to realize that it's not just about educating yourself. Anyone who wants to educate themselves can do so, but they can also educate others. And that's a message that I try to push on everyone I see. If you're too young to vote, find someone who's old enough to vote and bother them and tell them that they have to go out and vote. And tell them what you believe in. Tell them that you feel scared in your school. Tell them that this person who's running against this other person would make you feel safer. And slowly but surely, we'll make sure that we get change.
Voting is very important. It's what's going to help change the world. And is like a revolution coming to help bring a more positive change. Things that we're looking to do continuously as far as Black Lives Matter. We actually just endorsed a candidate, Omar Fatih. This is someone who just really represents the community, but what it is exactly what they said. You have to find out these people in your community. For everybody, it's going to be different. So there's going to be a lot of different research have to be done. With all of that being said, it's very key to talk to your representative. Internship with representatives you're interested in. Volunteer. Door knocking. Phone banking. Take your notebook out. These are things that we do within our organization as the grassroots to bring out people to our events, to inform people on what's coming up next or what's going on. These are small ways to start getting your foot in the door, to learning more about what a chambers looks like. A lot of people haven't really been in the chambers of where a mayor would be housed or where judges sit. Now's the opportunity, perfect time in the summer, start taking the light rail, take these buses down to your city halls. Just look around. Ask questions and take brochures. That's what I did. And it's really what helped me network to find the right people to choose on. And in our case, it's like Rena Moran, our representative, to push legislation, to say, no, these are bills that need to be changed for our police departments to abide by, and things like that. So it's just about finding the avenue of where you can bring change and how change comes. This system has been in place for years. You have to learn it. And that's one of the foundations. So me as an adult, one of the biggest things I say is don't stop here, go to college, because I came up on the east side of St. Paul, born and raised, one of the most underfunded districts in the state. I graduated in 2012 from the University of Minnesota Morris with an economics degree and a finance degree. The sole reason why was because none of my friends had money. Everybody was broke. Nobody had wealth. I was tired of hearing that excuse. So I had to go get it. And I had to figure out the keys. Now, when I did graduate 2012, I started working for Wells Fargo Banking. And banking, these are conversations we need to have about fraud and cyber technology and these cyber crime things that are happening. They'll steal your whole campaign. These are things us as Americans, we have to start honing in and focusing on some of these bigger issues. And that's where we can help get these kids as they go greater and greater places to have them thinking about that. And so these are things that we have to continue to address and reiterate it, because the only way it's going to stick with you is if you repeat it a million times. So now is that time to take your part and find something to do this summer. Be active.
Though I'm not a Minnesota loco, can I still answer? Awesome. So in Milwaukee, I'm a part of an organization called Leaders Igniting Transformation, or LIT for short, because we lit. And right. And we give brown and black students the platform to speak about social inequities and reform policies, because like we said before, in my community, black people don't vote. But they're the people you'll see protesting every day, day in, day out, over the police shootings, but they won't vote. So if you're so passionate about a situation that you're in, and you hate the people that are representing you, and you hate the people that are making these laws for you that confine you into an oppressive state, you need to go vote and kick them out. Kick them out of there, because they don't need to be there. If they're not representing you as an individual, if they're not portraying the rights that you want, kick them out, vote them out. So I guess we like to send pledge cards to different youth and kind of, draw them into our organization to tell them that, and instill in them that you need to vote, because your vote is your voice, and if you use your voice louder and louder and louder, you will kick all those unjust people out of the office. So, yeah.
All right, so we're going to be opening up questions for our entire panel. I do have to remind you, though, unfortunately, we're getting short on time, so we're only going to be able to take 2 answers per question. So, first question, everyone on the stage has different experiences regarding gun violence. So, how do you propose we create change together?
You have panels like this, and you open up the conversation for the different forms of gun violence. When the talking point has been school safety from our leadership, but gun violence doesn't just happen in schools. I've had friends that have lost friends from walking home from school. And when they were walking home from school from their college prep class, they were killed in gun violence, but it was referred to as gang violence. And when we let the media dictate and justify these deaths, we're not talking about the real issue. We're letting them sweep it away and divide the issue. But when we clump it all together and we look at gun violence as a whole, we can come up with policies that will save people not only in schools, but in clubs and movie theaters and churches. And that's the really important thing to know, is that when this gun violence is happening, the media does not tell the whole story. In the time of this panel, between 6 and 8 people have died from gun violence, most of them from suicides. Something like red flag laws and extended waiting periods would help prevent those suicides from happening. But that's not something that our leaders want us to talk about. They'd rather us talk about metal detectors outside of school because that makes their friends money. So think about that. Another thing is to check our privilege. I know that most people cared about Parkland because it was a white, affluent community. And when my friend Emma was asked, what about Chicago, her answer wasn't, what about Chicago? It was, I'm going to become friends with Chicago. And we didn't know what that meant. And then we reached out to this wonderful community at St. Sabina, and we met so many young leaders there that have been training in nonviolence, and they trained us in nonviolence. And they trained us. We learned so much in that one lunch with y'all that it was more than we could have ever learned inside a classroom. And that opened our eyes to see so many different communities suffer from unique forms of gun violence, but there will be policies that will protect all of them. And so by going around the country and talking to people from Milwaukee and Minnesota and Chicago and Iowa and Kansas City, we're able to see the different forms of gun violence that affects them and come up with a platform that will save lives not only in schools but everywhere. And so I think that's how we combat all these different forms of gun violence, is just approach it with this intersectional mentality that if something protects me, it may not protect my friends. And on that note, I just want to add, when we talk about adding more security in schools, and all that does, it does absolutely nothing for our safety. Santa Fe High School had 2 armed guards, 10 people still died. But when you add security in schools and more people with power and badges, more students of color get pulled out of class and have their education obstructed. The private prison industry will tell your kid in 3rd grade, based on their reading levels, if they're going to incarcerate them. In 3rd grade, they're telling you that your kid is going to be a criminal based on just the trends that are in front of them. We have to change that system too. There are so many different problems in this country that holistically we can fix if we just obtain morally just leaders that care more about us than profit. If you don't prioritize voting, the elected officials will not prioritize you.
Yeah, there's 2 mics.
Right. So I think while sitting up here has been super powerful, and just watching all of you speak, hearing all of you speak, and the things you have to say, I think the most powerful thing that I've seen today was while we were waiting in the back room after we had all introduced ourselves, we all took out our phones and we just found a way to contact each other. And I think that that's how we are going to make sure that change happens, because there is power in numbers, and we have this tool in our pockets, all of us do, that connects us to each other. And we need to be able to use that in the most effective way possible. We need to be able to reach out to as many people as we can register them to vote, get them educated, and that's really one of the most important parts of this, is to get people educated. Now, you said that you don't have a group that you wanted to join, but yet you're here with us as a group, and I think that's incredibly important, that we can come together as a group and make sure that we are all under the same, we all have the same idea. But at the same time, the more people that we get under this sort of umbrella that we have here, the more ideas we can try to understand, and out of that there can be some great ideas that will create change. But we just need to be able to reach out to people and listen.
Thank you. All right, I'll ask the group one more question before we open up questioning for the audience. A few of Minnesota state representatives have received A ratings from the National Rifle Association, including Paul Gazelica, there we go. Tom, is it back? Bach. I'm supposed to know this. Tom Bach and Joyce Pepin. All right, cool, I got that right at least. How does the NRA get in the way of passing common sense gun legislation?
Like I brought up, my representative is Eric Paulson. So just real quick, raise your hand if you're in the 3rd District. Okay, our representative has taken $20,000 from the NRA. Like, my life...
30, suppose it's 30.
20,000. Did I say 20?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So a lot of money. No, my life is worth 5 cents to Minnesota legislators when it should be priceless. It's getting in the way, NRA money is getting in the way of Eric Paulson and other legislators making common sense gun laws that should protect us. They're acting in their own self-interest and exploiting the interests of the American people, of Minnesotan people, the people they're supposed to represent, in order to better themselves. And I think that's a huge issue, and that's why we need to get to the polls, because that's the only way that we can make change, is if we use our voice and vote people like Paulson out of office.
Thank you.
Amen. So if you think about in history, money has a huge influence in our society. And since Eric Paulson is taking $30,000 from the NRA, they have a huge influence on him. Because if you think about today's day in society, mostly everything you get is money. So you can get clothes for money, you can get foods for money, you can even buy sex for money. Excuse my language, but... It's just, money is so influential that it kind of curves people's mindsets. So when it comes to gun control and money, which one do you think they're going to pick? Obviously, they're going to pick money. Because with more money, that means you can get more guns. More guns, that's more money. It's just the day in the society that we live in. But if we didn't live in a society that was so dependent on money, I feel like we can have better gun control and gun laws. And maybe for once, the kids in the school will feel safe instead of fear for their life every day.
Thank you. All right, so now we'll be opening up questions for the audience. You guys can... Do we have 2 microphones?
2 mics.
All right, cool. So we'll start on this end, and then we'll rotate back and forth. Please be respectful and ask only one question. And from the panel, we'd like for 2 people to answer so we can get through as many as possible. Yeah, someone. If he talks too much, just Yeah, y'all got the rest.
You're doing good.
What's up? Go ahead, yeah, whoever, you're first.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
First of all, I want to thank you guys for an excellent presentation. I actually happen to be the elected representative from the 5th Congressional District in Minneapolis and the surrounding suburbs. And I'm proud to be a F rating for the NRA. But my question for you is, here's my question. It is great that we are getting folks to mobilize to vote, and I'm 100% with that, absolutely. But what about asking candidates to either give the NRA money back or asking candidates to pledge not to take any at all? Where do you guys stand on that, and what are the prospects of the moment?
Thank you so much for your question. So we have been getting people through the No NRA Money Pledge. That's not from March for Our Lives, but it's something that we obviously support. If any of you watched the town hall that occurred a week after the Marjory Stoneman Douglass shooting, my good friend Cameron Caskey asked Marco Rubio if he would stop taking money from the NRA. Marco Rubio, that was a yes or no question, and Marco Rubio took 6 minutes to answer, and it was neither yes or no was his answer. And so I don't know if we can stop people from taking NRA money, because right now the NRA money is a safety net for these candidates. They have been shown, we have an NRA-controlled Congress right now. And so if I'm an elected official and my idea is I'm going to keep my position, I don't blame them for taking NRA money. It is the safe, smart political thing to do. We're changing that, though, because we're mobilizing and organizing a new, unlikely voter that is going to vote these people out, because their money is toxic. And with the NRA just constantly spending millions upon millions of dollars in these elections and losing some of these legislative battles that we've been having with them as young people. March for Our Lives, by the way, if you didn't know this, is a group of 14 to 20-year-olds. I am the oldest one in the group at 20 years old, and we've helped pass 52 laws across this nation. And we're living rent-free in the NRA's head. So they're gonna keep talking about us and spreading our message. And I don't say gun control, because we're not trying to control anyone's guns. We're trying to prevent gun violence. My shirt says stop gun violence. All of our policies are to prevent gun violence, none of which touch any law-abiding citizen's firearms or infringe upon anyone's rights. And so by preaching that and by being the real responsible gun owners of America with what we're promoting, I think we are going to scare these candidates away from the NRA and make their money completely toxic for the future. I just wanted to add one more thing. I know you said you had an F from the NRA, but recently the NRA removed all the grades from their website because they were being used against their candidates.
I'll take this answer. Well, first, we have to be able to talk to our representatives. I haven't been able to ask my representative that question, and I haven't been able to get an answer because I haven't been able to ask that question. Now, if I even got close enough to Jason Lewis to be able to ask him that question, I'm sure he would spend way more than 6 minutes trying to answer it. But the thing is, it's getting close to midterms, and at this point, we just have to find people who won't take money from the NRA. We have to find people to replace people like Jason Lewis in order for us to not even have to ask that question, right? So yeah, I think that's the answer. We don't, at this point, we're tired of asking that question, and we just need to make sure that we get people in office who will take that next step where that question isn't even a possibility.
Thank you.
I promised my friend David Hogg that I would shout something out real quick. So on his Twitter, if you just look up David Hogg, it'll come up. And he has a link to post comments on the ATF website about banning bump stocks. We only have 3 days left to make comments. So if you have a phone or access to the internet, please do that and just write a comment about, yeah, this bump stock thing is absolutely insane that this is available to people. And I don't want it to be like that because the NRA app, which I have, it tells me every few hours to post another comment, and we're not nearly that annoying, but this is my being that annoying to you guys, to just post it on your Facebook and promote these comments, because we only have 3 days left, and you could actually create change right now from your seat instead of waiting until November. So thank you.
Hi, I'm State Representative Erin May Quaid. Thank you for being here. Thank you. So first thing, the tool to find out the NRA ratings from past legislators is back up, and you can find it on the Washington Post. That just happened. But I have a question for you from the students in my district. I meet with them very often. I met with 12 students on Tuesday, and they wanted me to ask you, if they are not old enough to vote, how can they organize in their community, part one, and part two, if they have a representative that is strong on ending gun violence, how can they affect other legislators even if they don't live in those districts?
Thank you for your question.
A lot of youth comes up to me, and I'm not old enough to vote either. I'm only 17. I turn 18 in December, so I passed the different elections, so a bummer. But you can be a pivotal movement, a pivotal voice with the voting movement. If you just go talk like panels like this, discussions like this, conversations, if they leave this room and make effective change, and you sit down with your friends, you make a plan for what you're going to do, your agenda, what you're going to push, and who you want to vote for. Just like what you said before, register, educate, and vote. You need to educate yourself on who you want to represent you, because you are planning for your future and the present, and that's the greatest thing that you can do ever as a youth. If you have a set mind of who you want to be or what your rights and who you want to represent you, then it's pivotal right now that you talk to each other, you write down and research all the things that you want right now. Age is nothing but a number. If you feel a certain way about something, then you have the voice to speak up about it. No one can tell you to shut up. No one can silence or repress you. So if you are younger and you can't vote right now, your voice still matters, because you can push those other people, like you said, drag your family to the voting polls and tell them to vote, and vote these unjust people out of office.
And adding on to that, I want to reiterate, you can still mobilize even if you're younger than 18. I'm also only 17. My birthday's in January. Again, I can't vote either for midterms. So we can still mobilize as sort of an age cohort in order to push people to the polls. You can still set up voter registration in your schools. You can still be students that tell your seniors that if they're old enough, you need to go and vote because you are going to represent us as a school. If you make sure that they know they are representing something bigger than themselves, you can motivate them to go to the polls and make the difference that all of you want to see.
Hi, my name is Kristen Bonner. I will tell you in full disclosure that I am a candidate for the Minnesota House of Representatives here in Maple Grove and Osseo. Thank you. I wanted to say, first off, that I've spent the last year and a half as an organizer and legislative lead for Women's March, and I want to personally thank each one of you for your courage and your tenacity to come here tonight and raise up your voices on this issue. It's really, really important, and I'm really thankful that you're here tonight. We're honored. Thank you. So, as a candidate, I've heard a lot from you about what you don't want, right, from your representatives. But as future voters, as current voters, we all know that if you don't have a voice, you don't have, or if you don't have a vote, you don't have a voice, right? And so what I'd like to know from you is, what do you want from your representatives, or what qualities do you look for in a representative that really respects your voice and your mission here tonight?
All right, I want a leader that's open to having town halls and discussions and listening to people on both sides of the political party spectrum. A lot of leaders play into the party patronage sort of things where they only feed their party. They say, well, liberals, blah, 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 conservatives, blah, 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 rather than feeding both people. We're Americans, not Republican, Democrat. We're all one people, and if you're the governor, if you're a leader, you represent everyone, not just your party. So I feel like engaging everyone, regardless of party, is a huge, huge thing I look for in a leader.
I want people who want to be empowered to understand that everyone, I'm talking to everybody in this room also because I can't speak to you all individually, but nothing without us, about us, is for us. So you need to be able to and adapt to what everyone wants in like the correct way. We all have a voice even if we can't vote. Like our age does not define how much power that we have. And we want people to understand that. Because just because I'm young and I was always taught to be only dismissed when the bell rings, or I'll follow these certain types of rules that already define me as a child, that it's time for the adults to step down from the adult table and let the kids sit up. Because we're always told you can only sit at the kids' table, but now we're ready to eat.
You good? All right, so again, like, you know, we are pressed for time, so I can only take 2 more questions. But do not let that discourage you. We will all be here after the town hall is finished, and we can answer every single one of your questions. Because, you know, we just don't want to get, you know, the lights turned off on us, you know what I'm saying? But so after this, I can just take 2 more questions, and everyone else can come up to us and ask your question. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Suha Musa, and I guess one of my biggest things is, as the organizer at my high school, something I saw really quickly after the walkout on March 14th was a turn to complacency among my peers, whether they were old enough or not to vote, and I personally am not going to be able to vote. But, I mean, even looking out here today, it does seem like the majority are adults. So how do we force kids to mobilize? And even in my community, I remember door knocking and seeing complacency from these kids' parents too. So how do we change that attitude starting in our schools?
Let's be honest, kids love incentives like candy, chips, parties, whatever. And in Milwaukee, we're trying to formulate a voting/party/ if you do this, if you do that, your future will be set. And one thing that you have to come to conclusion with, you can't force people to make decisions about their lives, but you can educate them about why this is beneficial for them. And a lot of schools in Milwaukee don't have government classes. They don't really talk about legislation or who's representing us. I went like a whole 10 years without knowing who our governor was. That's shameful. But just pushing that agenda, we can't push teens to do it, but we can also form incentives and have voting registration at our schools and just trying to make it seem like it's important, if that makes sense? Because not a lot of kids do think it's important because not a lot of kids are educated about its importance.
So going back to that fundamental pop quiz, since we're all students, what are the 3 REV? Register, educate, vote. So we're at that educate moment, and let's be real, teenagers are pretty egotistical, right? Like the world revolves around us. If it doesn't matter to me personally, I don't really care, and that's the mentality that a lot of teenagers have. So if you want teenagers to mobilize, if you want the youth to do something, you have to make them understand why it should be important to them. They need to know why they should care. So that's what we need to emphasize, the fact that on a bigger picture, these decisions that your lawmakers make will affect you in a very visceral way. And that's what a lot of us in high school need to focus on as we're trying to get students to stay involved and stay enthusiastic about the movement, is for them to understand that these issues are going to continue to affect them until they do something about it.
This is kind of a long question, but I promise I'll land the plane. In the 1950s and 60s, when we had a lot of car fatalities, we studied cars. And despite GMC and Ford being some of the largest and most powerful companies in the world, we forced them to regulate to make them safer. And I feel that's because cars are seen as tools versus guns are not seen as tools. They're seen as an identity. And unfortunately, a lot of times when you boil down the arguments, it comes down to masculinity or control, which are 2 very powerful emotions that people feel. So you talked about very specific arguments that people make that are salient to them. How do you overcome these very visceral feelings that people feel either about masculinity or control?
See, the thing
I promised I'd land the plane.
What was that?
I promised I'd land the plane.
See, the thing with masculinity and stuff, it's really hard to overcome. It's hard to overcome a lot of things. And I feel like if we just continue working on it, and if we studied guns like we studied cars back then, and if we saw them more as a piece of plastic instead of an identity, I feel like we would, have better, like, I don't know what it's called, but we'd probably have less shootings. I don't know where I was going with this, but I really feel like overcoming it is going to be difficult. But if we continue to try to overcome all of this and see guns as something else that we, like, different from what we see it now, we definitely could make some serious change, y'all.
The gun issue in regards to the identity of people, a lot of our policies don't infringe on their ability to feel masculine with a gun, which I mean is just part of the sales pitch, like sex sells, and there's a reason why most of the billboards I see with gun shows and everything have women in bikinis that have nothing to do with guns. But the whole thing, we have to have a culture shift. One of the most educational moments that I've experienced in this was when I was talking to Congressman Mahoney, who is openly gay, and he talked about the process in which we normalized gay culture in this country. And he talked about how laws had to be put into place in order to allow for it to be openly discussed and openly experienced in public. And it's just about, we need laws to put into place so that when I go to a panel, I can't have these large men outside with multiple AR-15s blocking the door because it makes them feel tough that they're trying to intimidate children. Because it doesn't intimidate us, it just makes them look stupid. And so in regard to that, I think a lot of it just has to be that we have to hold this industry responsible. We don't allow cigarettes to be marketed to children anymore, but there are guns that are marketed to children. If you went and saw what the NRA convention was marketed as, 13 and under could come in for free. If you saw the little kid, their viral video of the little kid loading up the gun and pulling the trigger a few times at the NRA convention, that shit's terrifying. Because they treat it like it was a game and a toy, and this machine can kill people instantly. And so we have to really hold them accountable and not allow them to market to our youngest children when when they don't have an idea of what is actually right or wrong yet, when these 4-year-olds are being high-fived because they can reload a AR-15's chamber instantly. I mean, that is a huge step in the right direction if we were able to hold this industry accountable, because we can't allow them to keep marketing inappropriately, and we have to call these guns what they are. I mean, if you're going to use a gun for protection or for hunting, that's what it is. It's not a sex symbol. It's not a sign of masculinity or power. We have to not allow this false marketing. We don't let pills say that they're magic diet pills. They get sued. But if this gun is with a bunch of girls in bikinis, we allow that to go away or get away with it, and it's ridiculous. And so I think it's a whole culture shift that we have to keep this industry just regulated enough that they're not marketing to kids.
And on that note, Okay, yes, I'm sorry. So anyone, I literally mean, every town hall we've had so far, the panelists will stay up, we sit and we, even when I'm on the panel, I will answer probably 10 to 15 questions in a night. So they're here. So whoever you have a question for, you can just come up and ask them. So we're not trying to silence anyone. Everyone can ask their question and hopefully get an answer that they want. But on that note, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out, and I'd like for you guys to give a hand to our wonderful panelists and to yourselves for this discussion. And as some may know, it's Pride Month, and I'd like to say happy Pride and thank you for everyone who came from there. And thank you guys for coming out.